On October 25th, I'm going to be doing a free webinar. I'd love to see you there. And it's going to be called The 3 Secrets to Forge Strong Connections and Tips to Avoid Ghosting. That is painful, right? I'm going to talk about mistakes you might make when someone is pulling away, a phrase and phrases you can say to get people to open up, and reasons that your partner or the person you're dating is not prioritizing you. It's going to be good. Go to relationshipschool.com/connection secrets, and I'll see you there. Welcome to the show, Xavier Dagba.
It's an honor to be here, brother. So I'm glad that you have me here, and I'm also excited to just enter this conversation and to see where it brings us.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we met, I don't know, a few months back on some sort of influencer panel thing. And I just really appreciated what you said and what you're putting out there in the world. I've since been following you on social and Instagram, and really appreciate your content and how you're helping people.
And I received that gratefully. And, I want to reciprocate so much of that, in the way you're showing up, the way you're serving, the way you are serving relational intimacy. I think it is one great container of healing, and seeing more potent masculine voices in that field. Honestly, it excites me. It inspires me. So I'm really grateful for your work.
Thanks, man. Cool. Xavier, when people ask you who you are and what you're up to in the world, what's your response?
About who I am, the niche, almost impulsive answer that comes up for me is like, I'm still figuring it out. I'm still finding out who I am. And I think to a big degree, we are all kind of finding out. At this moment, there's an awareness of the soul being inside that is right now showing up as a father, as a servant, as a community shepherd to a certain degree, as a voice out there that is attempting to help people get in tune with their heart again. So these are some of the things that I'm showing up, but the core essence of the who I am, I'm still on a journey of just exploring. It is changing forms. If you had asked me that question 10 years ago or 12 years ago, I would have told you I'm an economist, I'm a statistician. And after that, it was just I have absolutely no clue who I am. It's just I would put myself in all these boxes, and then I realized the boxes were suffocating. So in a way, I have freaking no clue. Yeah. And I could give you the spiritual cliches right now. I'm a soul being having a human experience and all of that. But the actualized definition of who I am is still unfolding. So I'm on the path.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah, me too, man. You're also a father. It sounds like you have 3 kids. You said their ages, 4, 3, 2, or is that right?
4, 3, and 2. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts. I have 2 kids. They're 14 and 12 now. And it was a lot with 22 months apart. So yours are very close apart. And I imagine that's a lot. We might get into fatherhood here in a minute. And married, unmarried, divorced, kid,
Well, we have fiancé. My partner and I were fiancé, and her and I were supposed to get married throughout the pandemic. My family couldn't travel, a whole bunch of situations. And we were like, you know what? We're just going to postpone this whole thing. And we were navigating pregnancies, and she was completely exhausted. And I was like, let me just honor you throughout this whole thing, and let's put it to 2024. So it is something that is in process right now, but we've been in a committed relationship for close to 10 years now.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah, that's actually quite common. I've heard that a lot, that people had plans to get married during the pandemic, and then obviously things happened and they didn't, and they still haven't. And that's just normal now, So
yeah.
And then with 3 kids. Wow. Let's back up in time though. You said you were an economist and statistician. And now you strike me as a deep spiritual dude. So what fill in the gaps there. Like growing up, like who were you growing up as a kid? And then how did that become, sounds like I'm guessing you followed kind of a traditional path. And then I'm going to guess something happened that had you change once again who you are. So walk us through that.
Yeah, it's very traditional path, growing up born and raised in Africa, Central Africa. I'm originally from Cameroon and grew up there with my family, parents, hardcore Catholics, raised us during times of crisis. The country was going through some sort of economic crisis, and they really raised us with like looking at school as our salvation, getting the highest degree you could get as the salvation. And they really worked hard at it. Mm-hmm. Supported us in the best way they could. I come from a family of like engineers. My two brothers, I have 5 siblings. Oh, wow. My 2 brothers are engineers, sister, mathematics teachers, one that is bachelor in biochemistry. Just like we valued a lot intellect, and myself done so many things. First degree in actually high school mathematics teacher. So I got my first degree there, and I was like, yeah, that's not really it. And I was like, I'm going to get a bachelor in mathematics, which I did. Then I'm going to get my master's in mathematics, which I did. And I was like, no, that's not really it. I was like, I'm going to reach for a master's in statistics and economics, which I did. And I was like, no, that's not really it. Wow. I'm going to reach I got an opportunity to have a scholarship for a PhD in economics at the University of Montreal, full paid scholarship. And I got it. And I arrived here. Now, throughout this whole time, the reason why I'm so indecisive with settling is because I really just feel like I'm not fulfilled with all these things. I could settle for this and I would hate my life. And I was feeling this fear of letting down my parents, who I saw sacrifice so much for schooling and whatever in a country that's really, it was really hard, I saw them put everything for education. They did not indulge whatsoever, which they could have, but they did not. They chose to invest everything in their children. So part of me was feeling tremendous guilt about dropping all of this. So I was like, okay, let me just reach higher and let me reach higher and get into this PhD. 2013, I was just like, okay, I'm not listening. This is not it. And my grades did not justify me wanting to drop out, but I could not literally bring myself to the university some days. And I orchestrated my own dropout. So, being far away from home, it was a little easier for me to drop out. Initially, my parents did not know. They found out a year and a half after.
Oh, wow.
And I had so much shame about even disclosing that I was no longer going to school. They received letters from the university, and that's how they found out. Because at some point, university tried to get me back and all of these different things. So there was basically a mental breakdown that was happening at that time. It showed up as depression in so many different ways. I felt like I was betraying myself, betraying everybody around me. My grades did not justify letting go of all of that in any way, shape, or form. It's just this experience of feeling the abandonment that you've been dreading and experiencing the rejection that you've been dreading in a different part of the world. So it was what people would call a dark night of the soul. I often call it dark night of the ego because, in my opinion, my soul knows no dark nights. And to my soul, it was actually one of the brightest nights where the chains of my conditioning were so loose because I wasn't in my natural environment that for the first time I could hear what was actually really appealing to me. So I went through that phase of just like dissolving a lot of mental structures, dissolving a lot of my own conditioning, finding who I want to be in the world as a man, who I want to be in the world. What does it even mean to me to be a man in the world of today? All these conversations, I started having them back then. And how do I value connection? Because I realized that there was a lot of like I want to say conditional friendships that I had, relationships that were just like based on like the image that I was reflecting. But when I brought up this kind of core intention, which at the time only sounded like I want to serve, but it doesn't look like working for a bank.
Yeah.
I want to serve, but it doesn't look like writing research material about macroeconomics when I know it's never going to be used.
Yeah.
So I was like, I got to find out. So that's basically to kind of close the gap. That was the journey. And then I started investing myself into even more into spirituality, the healing arts. I was already into spirituality. I remember back home, even when I was leaving to come to Canada, my brother, he gave me all these books. I always consider him my first kind of like spiritual teacher. He gave me all these books about Wayne Dyer, all these OGs of spirituality, the Louise Hay. He gave me this hard drive with all of these teachers, Abraham Hicks and, you know, the OGs. And I don't think he knew what he was doing for me, but he was like, I remember when I was going through Montreal, homeless, don't know where I'm going to go. I had these things on tape. It was just like running through my mind. And he's still a hardcore Catholic and he's nothing too much into that spiritual stuff. He flirts with self-help and self-development and all of these different things. But I always tell him, man, you have no freaking idea what you did for me, giving me that hard drive.
Wow.
You know, it's like, it was a lifeline when I had nothing. It's like, I wasn't talking to you. The parents weren't talking to me. Everybody was angry at me. They thought I had just like betrayed the whole family. I felt misunderstood. I felt shame. I felt all this sadness. So that was a lifeline as I was figuring out myself, basically.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Wow. I mean, it takes so much courage to step away from mathematics and all the PhD and all the things, right? And what people expected of you.
Yeah. At the time, I was like, I was foolish. You know, when I look back, I was like, now I will see it as courage. Back then, I was like, yeah, I'm a little bit of a fool, but I don't know why I can't stop. Just like, can't turn away now. This is what I get to do. Yeah.
How do you, I want to come back to your story in a minute, but just when you are working with people now, how do you encourage people to listen to that voice that you listen to? Because I had a similar thing with me where something just felt off, right? And I kept going from job to job, relationship to relationship, just feeling off. And looking back now, I'm like, oh, I was trusting that voice, but it's very easy to pin that off feeling to something else, to make it about the girl or the job or the family or friends or whatever. So how do you, and it can be easy to medicate and ignore it.
Yeah.
So what's your advice for people that might have a feeling of they're in some career or down a path that doesn't totally feel like them, but everybody expects them to stay the course?
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a profound, crossroad that we all, to a certain degree, we all go through. And what I usually invite people to do is actually to romance that voice. It is actually to sit quietly with it. It is actually to explore. Because one of the first fears that we have is almost like a deep knowingness. It's like, if I start romancing that voice, it will not leave me unchanged. Mm-hmm. The realization that I wasn't happy in the PhD, that was like a truth that I could not unsee. As soon as I allowed myself to be clear with the fact I am not happy here. I think it happens a lot in relationships. It happens a lot in things that we know it's no longer serving us.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, we rationalize. And I have a teacher that often says rationalizing is rationally lying to yourself. Mm. It's like we find ways and we find layers of like reasoning that is not really truthful to us, but we just layer that on top of what we already deep down know inside. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions that I often ask people is like, what I already know that I'm not willing to acknowledge is. What deep down I already know that I'm not willing to acknowledge is.
Yeah.
And just that creates a whole wave of disillusionment. Truth alone has a powerful force of redirection.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we are afraid of truth is because we know if I realize truth, if I acknowledge, I'm going to have to let my life to adjust in a potent way.
Yeah.
So what I usually tell people is like, get truthful with yourself, like get real.
Yeah.
What I already know that I'm not willing to acknowledge is, and if I allow myself to acknowledge that, what I will have no other choice than shifting in my life at the moment is. And I just invite people to be with that. And the more you see it, it's going to freak the hell out of you at some point. But the more you keep romancing that thought form, the more you keep seeing it, it's like, yes, there is the ego voice that is like, holy shit, I'm gonna be abandoned. Mom is gonna be that. Dad is gonna be mad. Mom is gonna be mad. Dad is gonna be mad. My brothers will feel that I let them down. My friends are gonna disown me, some of them did, some did not. And then when you withstand these voices that are giving you the drama story, it's just like withstand them a little bit. Sit with them. Sit with these fears. Let them have their moment of giving you all the darkest potentials, and sit with them instead of running away to what you think you should be doing instead. Sit with them. And then ask the question, and then what? What happens after that?
Yeah.
On the other side of that rejection, what would happen? And if I'd made peace with that possibility, what else would be possible? I realized that I would have to go through a very difficult time of meeting a lot of the fears that I had already in my body. And then on the other side of it, I was just like, I want to give more credit to the love that my siblings, my family, that they have for me. I really want to give more credit to that. If they are going to disown me just because I'm making this choice in my life, and if that's it, if that's the only reason why they would like erase me from the family lineage, okay, that would tell me that the love wasn't necessarily as strong. And I'm going to grieve that. It's going to hurt really bad. But I want more. I want to invite more. And I remember having this kind of conversations with my dad because he is hardcore Christian. And I was just like, Dad, you're telling me about this love and all of these things. And you're like sending me messages to disown me because I let go of a PhD. And I don't really feel like that's the best way to invest my time, my life force in that. I understand I failed you and I apologize. I'm sorry. But that's all it takes for you to be like, you're going to cut off a son out of your life. I am disappointed. I remember voicing that to him. And I just like, let it go. You know, I cried the whole night. I remember walking in Montreal late at night. I was just like, at some point, I remember really late at night, there was this feeling of peacefulness within me on the other side of the hurt. So the steps of that, if I were to really give a framework, the first question is sit with truth. Ask yourself what I deep down already know that I'm not willing to acknowledge right now is. And if I acknowledge that truth, what I will have no other choice than shifting in my life is. If I allow myself to go through that shift, what I fear will happen is, and I'll give yourself permission to sit with that fear, with the intensity of that panic and whatever it is. And then ask yourself, and if I allowed myself to move through all of this, what would be possible on the other side is. And then after that, just like in whatever way it feels appropriate to take action, do it. Back then, it felt like revealing the truth to my family. And then it was like, okay, really closing doors with the PhD. And I lost a girlfriend back then over it. So they were just like lost in grief and just acknowledgement of a life that is a chapter in my life that was turning.
Hey, if you want to uplevel your life, your relationship life specifically, I want you to consider our Relationship Mastery program. It's 9 months of complete transformation where you become a better listener, a better communicator. You learn how to have secure relationships and you get an experiential taste of that. You feel seen and supported and challenged to reach your relationship goals. And really, you become a better communicator. So many people have gone through this course now. And we have a done with you version of it now, which is amazing, where you get assigned a private relationship coach. You get to do live group coaching with me once a month and ask me anything you want. There's office hours where you get to meet with one of our coaches to nerd out on the curriculum. And the community is very strong. And these are people who care a lot about relationships and they want to get what they want to get, which is they want to be in a relationship and not betray themselves, right? They want to get the relationship they want while being true to themselves. That's what most of us want. And this course is the path for you to get that. Here's what one of our participants in the past has said about this course.
What I would say to people that have been listening to the podcast but aren't ready to take that final step into joining the course, the most powerful thing has been like the partner calls. The accountability is something that you're not going to get by just listening to podcasts on your own. Because I thought the same thing, like, oh, I'm getting a lot out of just listening to these podcasts, and I'm, been in therapy, I've, done this and that. To take that deeper dive and the commitment, there's something about just the financial commitment, the time and the energy that you put into it. What you put in is what you're going to get out of it. And so again, if, invest in yourself.
All right. Amazing words from one of our heartfelt students here at the Relationship School. If you want to change your life like they did, go to relationshipschool.com/relationship mastery, and we'll see you in there. Yeah, this is so powerful. So I kind of heard 4 questions in there that you so beautifully asked us to kind of do for ourselves. So that's awesome. So we've got our 4 questions. Let me come back to how you then shifted after you moved through this process of kind of acknowledging truth, and we're like, okay, I can't pursue this path anymore. I'm going to pursue a different path. Who are the guides, your brother you mentioned, were there any other mentors or guides along the way that had you eventually step into what I perceive as like a coach / guide now?
Yeah. At the very beginning, I couldn't afford any guides. The internet was my coach. So, I was really diving into these teachings. I would say they were like something that I really learned was like mentoring from afar. I would really look at people that were living the life that I aspired to. I didn't have the means to hire them. I could not hire them. Every now and then I could, I remember going through that phase, I'm no longer receiving the financing from the university. And then first job, like dishwashing job. I was like, I need to pay the bills and I don't want something that's going to overwhelm me with responsibilities. I could have found a more higher paying job, but I did not want a career.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want something that will allow me to pay the ridiculously low rent that I had at the time because I just needed a place to sleep. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. But I couldn't afford much more. So the internet was my guide. And I remember seeing the teachers that I related to, the coaches that I related to, the people that were showing up in ways that I aspired to. And, actually some of them, I started following my envy a lot. Mm. My first coach wasn't necessarily a person. It was actually the feelings that I had inside of me. I started really following the envy. I was like, how come this person is doing it, but I can't, or I feel like I'm not able to? And I had all these limiting thoughts about myself. Like, who am I? This kid from Africa that is arriving here in Canada, and I think I can help people about their lives and like make some of the hardest decisions in their lives. I had to humble myself, coming down from the intellectual pedestal of like being a PhD this or being a master's in statistics and all of that. I was really linear in terms of my thinking, and I had to balance that. I had to humble myself a lot. And going back to the foundations of what it means to honor people, to respect them, to step out of my own judgments, and step out of my own ego. So envy became my teacher. Grief back then became my teacher. And I started realizing my envy and the judgments that I was projecting on so many people that were leaders in a way that I thought I could be, but I was in denial of. I started pointing towards all these things within myself, repressed and frustrated desires. And I had to really sit with that, to own that. So I went on a quest to just like learn how to balance my own emotions, resolve the emotional conflicts inside of me, because it was really clear to me that I was emotionally unskilled. I was really emotionally unskilled. I didn't know how to be with my own shame.
Yeah.
I would kind of like discharge shame in many different ways. I didn't know how to be even with the grief that I was going through, the feeling that I am a failure. So I started taking trainings. I remember some of the initial trainings that I took, emotional freedom technique, to kind of like be more with my emotions and kind of relieve these emotions. So many different things, kind of even exploring trauma and how to resolve emotional conflicts inside of me, because it was clear that I was riddled with so much of it. So many of the early teachers were people that were offering out there some of these courses that I could just take with like a very minimal investment at the time, because I couldn't afford much more. And I would just like take the trainings and I would be my own guinea pig.
Yep.
And I just went like that. I just, until I was able to afford even being on someone's membership. And really learning from them and taking the opportunity to be in someone's membership to see, okay, sometimes to receive some free coaching, in the membership, knowing that, hey, I can't pay this person to work with me one-on-one. I worked with I'm not sure if you've heard Kyle Sees. And then later I found teachers that were instrumental and pivotal on my path, like the Robert Augustus Masters and all these people and they came a lot later. But initially there was just like this self-exploration, because I was just in a place where I couldn't necessarily have the luxury to work with some of these people. So mentoring from afar was, for me, what are the traits that these people are displaying? How am I putting them on a pedestal? How am I just owning within myself things that they are demonstrating? How can I begin to actually reclaim some of what I'm seeing in them? And I remember I was working with a guy back then, and he had this recommendation. He was like, every single day for 30 days, go out of your way to reach out to people that they are reflecting something you see in yourself that you're out of touch with. Go in their DMs, say thank you. Just for the way they're showing up. Weirdly enough, out of all the people, I did that for over 100 people. I had so many of them respond with something kind. And it was just a breath of fresh air that I kind of needed the time to be like, okay, you got this. Just keep going a little bit. So mentoring was difficult at the very beginning. I swallowed all the books I could until I was able to afford mentors.
Yeah, beautiful. And then, are you now a coach, a therapist? How would you describe yourself now?
Well, I would say I'm a coach. Trained as a coach, and I've taken all these different trainings. All these trauma release trainings, EMDR. I've taken all these different modalities to basically bring together some sort of coherent path to integration, which in my opinion, my work is all about. It's about integration. It's about coming together and defragmenting ourselves. What I mean by that is all these parts that we have rejected or disowned in the shadow because the world around us didn't know how to receive them and love them. In my opinion, we'd really reclaim our power when we embrace them all, good or bad,
completely,
dark or light. So shadow integration, shadow work has been an instrumental part in my own journey. And it's also instrumental in the work that I'm doing today. And I've seen that the outcome of that is to be able to lead, to love, to serve from the heart instead of from our wounds,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, amen. Yeah, it's cool. You mentioned Robert Masters as well. He's been on the podcast a couple times. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Sweet. He does some deep work with people for sure.
Oh, he's been a therapist of mine, and I've participated in some of his programs, and yeah.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. How would you tell a person if they have that envy towards, because with social media these days, there's always someone we're looking up to, right, or comparing ourselves to. Yeah. What's a technique or a tip you have for the listener to work with that in a positive way, in a generative way that maybe you did or that you teach?
Yeah. The first thing is like when people are experiencing anything that is dark, anything that we've been conditioned to see as dark, you shouldn't envy and you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. My invitation would be to step away from the should for a certain degree and to begin to romance the feeling. Because for so many people, envy actually shows up a lot as judgment. Mm-hmm. It's like we see somebody and we kind of judge the way they're showing up. We kind of judge like who does this person think they are to be able to do this or to step on that stage or to speak with this much authority or to show up in this kind of like liberated way. I often see women that would say like to another woman, it's just like some of them would happen to be triggered by another woman's sensuality and kind of like embodiment, or for some men, I've seen some that could happen to be triggered by the way another man shows up in, strong confidence, embodiment of his own masculinity or whatever it may be. The question is first to go beyond the judgment and to really look at what it's pointing at. And what I've seen is envy is often pointing at repressed and frustrated desires. Mm. So the question is actually, what is this person displaying that I don't know how to relate to within myself?
Right.
What trait do I see in this person that I don't feel like that I'm actually judging within myself, and I don't think it is actually even okay? And I would actually challenge the judgment, which is, hey, where's this coming from? Why shouldn't one person show up in this way? Is it possible that it is pointing at something within me that I don't think is just possible, accessible?
Yeah.
Is it possible that this envy is actually a guide towards, pointing towards something that I get to integrate once again? And what I've learned is over the years, I even created an envy list on Instagram. Mm. It's like somebody that I would see that would just like show up so overconfident. I was just like, who the hell do you think you are? Who ordained you with the power to show up the way you're showing up? I'm immediately envious. And I would literally journal and sit with the energy of the person, go through, watch videos, and sit within my body. Okay, what brings up when I see this person show up this way? What does it bring up inside of me? If I showed up in the way this person is showing up right now, what am I afraid will happen? Who do I fear would disown me? What belief do I feel like, I would be, what aspect of my conditioning do I feel like I would be opposing? And I really sit with that. I'm just like, okay, let's start taking notes. There's a gift in there. There's really a gift in there. What specifically about this person is really bothering me? Or what specifically about this person is really appealing to me, but I am kind of repressing and frustrating. And I could name, I have a list of these people right now. Yeah. I could name them and be like, okay. And so many of them I ended up working with because I was like, okay, you got something that's calling me. Mm-hmm. And I would reach out. I'll be like, okay, how can we work together? How can I be in your next group? How can I be in your thing? It's just like, right. And I would go out of my way to even celebrate that. Have a mentor, right? Well, a mentor that I worked with, he's no longer a mentor at the moment. This way he was showing up with his wife, with his family, with his kids, and the way he was actually hugging his sons and kissing his sons, I was just like, this is kind of gross. That was the feeling inside of me. And then I realized, oh, I never got that with my dad. Right. I never had that thing. And it's actually kind of like poking that, inner child inside of me. That's like, yeah, I had to basically judge it to rationalize disowning it.
Yeah.
I had to judge the tenderness that I would see in some dads out there to rationalize disowning it. And I was like, damn, I started crying and just like, yeah, that was a little bit of a missing piece in my life. And it allowed me to begin to reclaim that to a certain degree and to also demonstrate that with my own kids.
Yeah, tenderness,
so,
right? Like, because you strike me as a
absolutely
tender guy that could actually do the same, like just pull your kids close and hug and kiss them.
Just like hug him, man.
Yeah.
And just like, I usually hold my kids right now and just like, you stop. And they're like, no, daddy. I'm just like, no, you stop. So it opened my heart in one way. So there is so much that has happened for me when I started just romancing all these and darkened parts that normally you're not supposed to come close to, the envy, even the judgment. And that's so instrumental in the way I'm showing up in my work today.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's like DeMartini, who we both, know.
Yeah.
He taught me actually, like, there's people I'm judging out there and I'm triggered by, it's probably a disowned part of me. So could I try it on that? Like, what if I own that trait, right? Whether it's a quote, perceived negative trait or perceived positive trait, really been helpful for me, not only be less judgmental, but step into, I'm kind of an asshole sometimes, or wow, I'm actually extremely nurturing when I before say was rejecting nurturing. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So,
how about fatherhood? Like, what's one thing you're getting about being a dad, going through that initiation?
The first initiation about being a dad was kind of realizing how there was just a tripling weight of responsibility that came initially when I looked at being a dad and everything that it represented in my mind. I was overwhelmed by responsibility. And the first initiation for me was I wanted to be a dad that would actually demonstrate possibility for my kids. Basically, the main imprint that I had from my father was the sacrifice aspect, which I respect. My dad was an athlete. He was a musician. He had all these aspirations. He went to the Olympics in like 1980 in Moscow. He was into it. And we always saw this. He recorded some music that we loved as kids. He taught me how to play guitar. I have a harp in my office and kind of like this affinity for music that comes from him. But he abandoned all of that. And I understand in the time that we were navigating, you would be a starving artist. You wouldn't be able to take care of a family. I grew up in a time where I remember when I was age 5, from December, I think I was born in 1989. So in 1994, December 31st, 1993, to the next day, which is January 1st, 1994, the currency lost half its value back home. And that means everything you had in the bank account was worth, half kind of less. You just lost half the purchasing power that you had. So he decided to let go of like music, everything. He just decided to disown his dreams. So we saw that
raise you guys in a good way or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And we always kind of like appreciated the sacrifice, but also we lived with his sadness. Like his whole life, he was sad about all the things that he wanted to and he couldn't. And we asked him so many times, why did you stop? Why aren't you writing anymore? Even for fun. Yeah, he's like, it's just like, it makes me way too sad to go back to it. And I just realized in 2018, I was still flirting with the work I'm doing today. I wasn't going full in. I wasn't going all in. I had a previous business, which I thought I wanted to help people. I set up this kind of gym in Montreal. I was a personal trainer, online coach, created meal plans for people. And I always felt like, yeah, this is not it. In April 2018, when I found out we were expecting my first son, that was the line in the sand for me. It's like that archetype of the father came online, full swing. And for me, it was like, I'm not going to repeat this cycle of being the dad that didn't go after what he truly desires because of my kids.
Right.
Because I had the impulse of like, okay, let's get my shit together. Let me actually let me use my master's to get like a nicer job or something like that. That imprint was strong.
Yeah.
Because the gym business wasn't working well. So what happened in 2018? Closed down the gym. Let our partners go with like the name, the company, whatever. I was just like, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I took responsibility for that dream of mine. That was my first initiation into fatherhood.
Wow.
Which is like, we are going to go all in.
You put your step
whatever it takes. It's just like, we're going to go all in. And that's the hill where I die. And weirdly enough, my business started taking off from there.
Yeah.
2018. And I was dealing with a lot of like, even physical issues back then. Like, I had this like weird onset of asthma symptoms. I didn't know where it was coming from. Basically, I've realized in my life, the more I reject things that I really feel like I'm called to do, the sicker I feel.
Yep.
When I kind of made that decision, at the end of 2018, the asthma symptoms were gone away. I really started feeling all the fear that was still here. I had an intense period of panic attacks, and I just allowed myself, with the support that I had back then, I'm going to lean in there. I'm going to sit with the anxiety. I'm going to sit with all of these different things. I'm not going to cope in all the ways I knew how to cope. So that was the first thing. And then, now looking at the kids growing, there is the next initiation, which is they have this beautiful capacity to pull out of you the parts that you had repressed within yourself. In the way I see my sons expressing themselves, or my daughter expressing herself. And sometimes I get triggered, and I know enough to be like, okay, this kid is playing an agent it's playing the healer in my life right now. And I get to look at these aspects of me that I've been rejecting and bring these aspects back in my heart so that I can be loving with this child. Does it mean that I never lose my shit? Absolutely not. Does it mean that I'm always like regulated? Absolutely freaking not. Does it mean that I can have more compassion with myself even when I, show up in ways that I'm not really feeling proud of, when I yell a little bit more than I would like to, or lose my temper a little bit more than I would like to? Like, yes, I'm able to look at that. I'm able to actually practice repair, because that was one thing that was missing with my dad. It's like we didn't know how to come together. It's like all these different things. And another aspect, which is I want to show to these kids what it looks like to love their mom. I really want to show that to them, to the degree where I even want to make them, a little bit uncomfortable at times with like just me hugging her and me showing her love, and just like, oh, daddy, dad. It's, when I hold her and I kind of like hold her in my arms, I'm a little goofy at times with the kids. It's just like, look, I'm gonna carry mommy right now. Like, oh, daddy. And so there are these little things that I was really brought up with this firm and strong father figure, which I appreciate. But I really wanted to also show them that there is that firmness and that strength that is necessary, but there is also the tenderness that is available as well. And especially for my boys. And then there's also, in the times of today, I've had the initiation of just like, what are the hills where I'm willing to die? What are the battles that I will literally die for? in the world of today, what does it look like for me to actually show up as a stand for these children, to create an environment where they can explore themselves and where, they are going to have so many of the things that I didn't have because my parents could not. So, fortunate enough to be in a space where we're like deciding to homeschool them. I work from home, so I see a lot of their development. We get to create a lot together. So that is something that feels like a big journey at the moment, to just decide to homeschool these kids, to create activities around what they are really interested in. So it is shaping me in ways that I never saw this coming. I'm literally walking in an aspect of my life that my conditioning did not predict. Like, to my family, I'm a little bit of an alien right now in the ways I'm leading my life.
Yeah.
And it actually created and brought up so much richness in my family because I'm inviting them in. And I'm not here trying to protect our choices. I'm just like, okay, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing this. And they're curious. They ask questions. My mom is like, is that even a thing? How can you do this? I'm just like, yes, we are.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit how fatherhood is shaping me at the moment.
Yeah. It's so inspiring. Hey, quick interruption here. Imagine a career that draws on your passion for personal growth and relationships, that harnesses your ability to support, challenge, and connect with others, that helps you develop as a person while you help others at the same time. What if you could earn a living while making an impact on thousands of people's lives and even on the future of society and how we treat each other? It'd be pretty cool, right? Well, that job does exist. It's the job of a relationship coach, and I believe that the relationship coaches in the world are going to play a crucial role in the future of our culture, not only in the US, but abroad. 1 in 2 marriages still ends in divorce. 3 out of 5 Americans are lonely. We've got a serious loneliness epidemic and a looming mental health crisis that's, I think, already here. Couples that do well live 10 years longer than couples that don't, okay? According to the Gottmans, 80% of couples are headed in the direction of divorce within their first 4 to 5 years of marriage. Yikes. Okay, relationship stress is chronic disease. It creates chronic disease, in my opinion, from what I've read and the research I understand. I think it really hurts people everywhere. And I think the only way to really address this you could say relationship crisis, really, because it looks like a mental health crisis. It looks like a loneliness crisis. But we have to ask why. What is the root of this? Well, possibly how we raise kids. Possibly it's how we treat each other in our intimate, closest relationships. And the bottom line here is that people need help. They need your help. And our relationship coaches are slowly growing their businesses and doing well and feeling fulfilled and like they have a meaningful purpose and career where they get to work for themselves. So if you want to come be a part of this amazing training, you can apply right now. We're taking applications. That's open currently, and go to relationshipschool.com/RCT if you want to apply and get an interview. We do offer a portion of scholarships to people that enroll if money is an issue, and it's a big investment. But if you think of the return on the investment, what you get out of this training, you are going to transform as a person, as an individual, and you're going to become a better partner, better parent, etc. And you're going to learn how to effectively help people with their relationship challenges, thus leading to less loneliness, perhaps, and less mental health challenges for people out there. Okay. So come apply for our amazing training, relationshipschool.com/RCT. We train coaches here is one of the things we do at the relationship school. And you so boldly stepped into, hey, this is how I want to heal. This is what I want to do with my life when the fatherhood thing came online for you. What advice would you have for a new coach who's stepping into, a career as a side hustle, or they're like, okay, I'm going to do this, but they're a little bit scared. They're cautious. Maybe they have imposter syndrome. What would you say to them?
The first thing about the imposter syndrome, I would say the imposter is usually flaring up the most in the areas where you are gifted. The imposter is usually kind of like highlighted it's actually highlighting the gifts the most. And I've experienced that in my own journey as a coach. I realized over the years that I've taken so many trainings, and all they did were actually validating things that were already coming naturally to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful for both, but I wasn't really trusting the natural knowingness inside of me. Like, I worked with so many people just to realize, oh, what this person is actually teaching me is how to trust that aspect inside of me that is the most natural.
Yeah.
I've worked with masters, and like what he was pointing at is like, hey, you see that intuitive voice, you see the way you frame that kind of question for that person. Didn't you know that already at the beginning? I was like, yeah, I knew that. I wanted, that's the first question that popped in my mind. He was like, next time, lead with that.
Yeah.
And so many of the trainings that I took were just like honing or directing me towards that,
Mm-hmm.
building a stronger relationship with that kind of like intuitive knowingness inside. So to a new coach, I would say the imposter the imposter syndrome, or the imposter inside of you, is basically pointing at an innate knowingness. The imposter is usually, to me, it was showing up as, I had a lot of free clients when I was feeling insecure.
Yeah.
As a coach. I wasn't ready to charge for my worth. I was really insecure. I charged the most ridiculously low prices ever. And I would spend a few sessions. I remember one client especially, she was like, I don't understand what just happened, because I've been working on this for like 15 years. And I feel like we've cleared in this number of hours something that has been crippling me for such a huge amount of time. And I was like, what the hell do you mean? I couldn't hear her. And she was pointing at something within, or a way of relating to her situation, or a way of holding space, a way of leading her, that caused her to experience transformation in a way that she needed. So I've realized that the imposter is actually asking you to pay attention. Pay attention to the gift that you're disowning. Pay attention to the ways you have created so many dreadful stories about what it would look like if you allowed yourself to fully embrace these gifts. That's the biggest gift, in my opinion, of the imposter. Yeah. So I often invite people, when the imposter is showing up in your life, what is it about? What is it about that you're attempting to do? What is it about that you're getting close to? And the closer you get to this, the more you feel this activation inside of you. Something that came up so much for me growing up is there's this aspect that we call the golden shadow, which is the light that we disown in the dark. You know, the light that growing up people around us didn't know how to nurture. For some people, it might be the art, the creativity. For some people, it might be their ability to hold space for people and to be with them in a way that creates appropriate space for healing. For some people, it might be their capacity to support people and to just like infuse this energy of like encouragement and support and joy in them. But back then, maybe the caregiver was like, no, you're a little too hyped for me right now. I need space. And you took that internally. You were like, I cannot really express that. You took your joyous nature, your creativity, when your dad was maybe tired after work and he couldn't look at the beautiful designs that you created, during school or at school, and he disregarded your singing because maybe he was stressed or anxious, or your mom, she was busy doing something, and you took that as this part of me that I love so much, that is so precious. People around me don't know how to nurture that, and you push that away. I've realized that usually when we get closer to reclaiming these parts, there are all these survival mechanisms that show up, like the imposter, like the saboteur inside of us. And these archetypes are actually assessing your threshold, and by threshold here, I mean your emotional capacity to actually be able to hold your gift, to hold your light, to hold the potency that you have you want to bring to the world, and to make peace with the responsibilities, the consequences, and the outcomes that may come from you embracing all of that. I've realized that the imposter inside of me, the saboteur inside of me, they are always asking the question, are you actually ready? Do you choose to do this? And when they bring dread, they're like, are you ready to accept this as a possibility? And I lean in the fear and I allow myself, if I move through this, what would be possible on the other side of that? And I allow myself to be with the fearful part and to romance that part. Practice regulating my nervous system. If I actually show up out there, if I show up on this, on this podcast conversation that we're having right now, I can screw this up royally. I can make a fool of myself right now. Mm-hmm. In order for me to show up with you, I have to make peace with that responsibility. And I can suck so much on this podcast that you may even decide, no, I'm not going to post this thing because it was just like it was a waste of your time. That's a possibility. There's a part of me that has to sit with that and be like, man, I don't want to make a fool of myself. I admire this guy. I respect the work he's doing on the world. And I may come out there and just like lose my language. Can that be okay? The answer needs to be yes for me. Yeah. If it's not yes, I will not do that. So I have to look at that darker potential and make peace with that. I also have to look at the potential of like, wow, I can actually show up on this podcast and it may become maybe one of the most beautiful interviews I've ever made. And shit, maybe it will bring too much light on me or too much attention on me. What insecurity is that bringing up inside of me? Can I actually be with that? So we have these survival patterns that are assessing. It's like, are you able to say yes to the darker and to the lighter potentials that whatever action that you're going towards is actually may eventually bring? Are you a yes to it? Yeah. And back then for me, when I was making the choice of leaving the PhD, are you a yes to the fact I knew my parents would be livid? I knew it. That wasn't a possible, that was a certainty. Yeah. I knew they would feel betrayed. I had to say yes to that. It took me a full year, to just be with the possibility that I'm going to fail and I'm going to hurt. Right. Some of the people that I love the most in my life cannot be okay. Mm-hmm. It took me a full year to be like, yes. Yeah. And then it was like, okay, what is on the other side of it? So all I know right now, there's a little bit more freedom, but I don't know if there is really a promise on the other side of doing this work. So I'm going to have to trust the unseen. I'm going to have to romance a feeling inside of me that literally gives me no other promise than hope and aspiration. And I don't know, and faith. It's like, that's all I have. Yeah. And like, am I willing to build trust with that part of me? I feel like for every coach, every creator, every agent of change out there, building trust with that unseen fabric of life is so instrumental. It is so instrumental. And, unfortunately, the guarantees are not written in stone. Like, I couldn't have predicted the work I'm doing right now. I couldn't have predicted any of this. Yeah. I had no freaking clue. And that feeling and romancing that and knowing that I am not just at the mercy of this field of possibility. I'm not just at the mercy of life. It's a partner. It's a co-creative partner. I have a say. And the intent that I'm bringing there, the more harmonious my energy is, the more benevolent this field of possibility is going to be with me. So the best investment is actually me bringing my most harmonious and coherent energy, most integrated energy. That is the best freaking investment ever. So in every now moment, the question would actually be, if I surrender to the voice of the imposter inside, or if I surrender to the voice of resistance, I'm just like, no, can't do it. Would I be feeling more integrated in that moment? Or would I feel like I'm abandoning an aspect of myself? If you are abandoning an aspect of yourself because you're playing that game, you are encoding your future. You're literally encoding your future with possibilities that will reflect more of that disharmony and separation and hurt. So I went into my first business knowing already I was going to fail. This is a gym business. I wasn't fully in there.
You weren't bringing the vibe. Yeah.
I wasn't bringing the vibe.
Yeah.
Now I've realized that being integrated doesn't mean that you have no fear. Being integrated doesn't mean that your saboteur doesn't have a voice. It means that you're able to relate to it, but you're not relating from it. It means it's not running the show. I'm able to look at the fear. I can be with it. I can regulate myself. I can move through it. And from that place, I can actually create so much more harmoniously. And like Robert Masters often says, fear is excitement in drag. The more you challenge that imposter within you, you may actually experience that fear. But when you romance that fear with an open heart, there's a catalyst that happens through the way you relate to that fear. It's almost a third energy that you create. And that third energy of your open heart is meeting your fearful self. And when your fearful self realizes, I may be abandoned by the whole world out there, but I will not be abandoned by self.
Yeah.
You liberate yourself. And I keep experiencing that over and over again. It's a very long answer to your question, but that's what I have to offer.
There you have it, coaches. Listen to that part, rewind that. That's awesome. Thanks, Xavier. Last question, in short here. We ask every guest this in closing. Because one of our missions is to reach young people. So if I had, you and I were standing in front of a room of 1,000 high school students, and you could only teach them really one short thing about love or relationships, what would you say to them?
Oh, I gotta take some time to sit with that. Oh. I'll tell them the first thing is what is sacred is not outside of them. Because I've realized that our younger generations, they are looking for what is sacred, but they do not necessarily trust ancient structures like church, like old spiritual organizations, and they look for what is sacred outside. They look for virtue on social. They look for virtue outside there. And the first thing that I would get them to realize is what is sacred is not outside of them. They long so much to be loving, but there's very little of that kind of guidance. So they're looking for external measures of what is virtuous to do. But that'll be the first thing. What is sacred is not out there.
Yeah.
And it is inside there. And I would also tell them that they are the bridge between where we are right now and the new paradigm that we are creating. And the bridge needs to hold all parts. It needs to hold. I've realized that one of the big pitfalls that I went through as a youngster was trying to disown the wisdom of the elders, of those that came before me.
Yeah.
I did a lot of that. And some of the reasons why I've been looking for, in the last few years, mentors that were just like the ancients, the OGs, and wanting to work with them is because I realized that there was a little bit of arrogance in the way I was approaching love and spirituality and all of that. It's just like a new blood that wanted to prove himself to a certain degree. And I would also tell them that the ancients are not foolish. I would invite them to spend some time in observation and curiosity, especially about people that went before them, but also to remember that they are the bridge with something new, and they get to apply the new consciousness that they are coming with to to create beautiful new ways to relate to each other as human beings. So yeah, that answer is not fully formulated yet, but these are a few thoughts that are coming up.
Beautiful. Thank you. Awesome. Xavier, where can people find you?
Well, people can find me on my website, XavierDagba.com, and on Instagram or on social, I'm usually there. And yeah, beyond everything, it's deep gratitude and reverence for having me here on the show, man.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for giving your gifts like you do in the world.
My pleasure, brother. Thank you very much.